Before the first cities rose, before the first words were spoken, before history learned how to remember itself, there was Africa. Imagine standing on the edge of a vast plain just before dawn. The air is cool, almost fragile, and the sky holds that deep indigo color that exists only for a few quiet minutes each day. Somewhere in the distance, a low rumble rolls across the land, not thunder, but the movement of life itself. Hooves strike the earth, wings unfold. A lion's call carries through the dark, not as a threat, but as a declaration that this place has a heartbeat. Africa does not simply exist, it breathes. Africa is not a single story, and it never has been. It is a continent larger than the United States, China, India, and Europe combined, yet often spoken of as though it were one place, one experience, one idea. In reality, Africa is a living mosaic of landscapes, languages, cultures, and histories layered over millions of years. It is the birthplace of humanity, the engine room of biodiversity, a land of ancient civilizations and modern megacities, of resilience and reinvention. To understand Africa is not to memorize facts, but to listen to the land, to its people, and to the deep rhythms that have shaped life on Earth itself. Our journey begins far before written history, in a time when the continent looked both familiar and alien. Africa sits astride the equator, anchored by some of the oldest rock formations on the planet. Beneath its soil lie geological memories stretching back more than 3 billion years. These ancient foundations helped shape something extraordinary, environmental stability mixed with dramatic change. Over millions of years, shifting tectonic plates opened the Great Rift Valley, tearing the continent slowly apart from northeast to southeast. Volcanoes rose, lakes formed, climates fluctuated, forests retreated, and grasslands expanded. And in that space between forest and savanna, something remarkable happened. This is where we meet our earliest ancestors. Imagine small bands of early humans moving across open plains, tracking animals, reading the land like a living map. Survival required observation and memory, which plants healed, which poisoned, where water pooled after rain, how animals moved with the seasons. This intimate relationship with nature shaped not only bodies but minds. Brain size increased, language slowly emerged, and with language came shared knowledge, culture itself. As the climate shifted again and again, humans adapted. Some stayed, others left. Roughly 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, small groups migrated out of Africa, eventually populating every corner of the planet. Every person alive today carries this legacy. No matter where your family comes from, your deepest ancestral roots trace back to Africa. This is not metaphor, it is biology. Yet Africa did not freeze in time once humans left. It continued to evolve, diversify, and innovate. As ice ages came and went elsewhere, Africa experienced its own cycles of drought and abundance. These environmental pressures encouraged the development of agriculture in several regions independently. In the Nile Valley, along the Niger River, in the Ethiopian highlands, people began domesticating plants and animals, laying the groundwork for complex societies. One of the earliest and most iconic of these civilizations rose along the Nile River. Ancient Egypt is often treated as a world apart, but it was and remains deeply African. The Nile did not merely support life, it organized it. Annual floods deposited nutrient-rich silt, allowing agriculture to flourish in an otherwise arid landscape. This predictability gave rise to surplus food, specialization, and centralized governance. Writing systems emerged. Mathematics advanced. Architecture reached monumental scale. The pyramids were not miracles built by mystery. They were achievements of human organization, engineering, and labor. Skilled workers, not slaves, hauled massive stone blocks with precision that still challenges modern understanding. Egyptian society produced advances in medicine, astronomy, and philosophy that influenced civilizations far beyond Africa's borders. South of Egypt, the kingdom of Kush thrived in what is now Sudan. Often overlooked, Kush rivaled Egypt in power and sophistication, and at times ruled Egypt itself. Its rulers built their own pyramids, smaller but steeper, dotting the landscape along the Nile. Farther west, complex societies emerged along the Niger River, where cities like Geno flourished as early as 250 BCE, long before many European urban centers existed. As trade routes expanded, Africa became deeply interconnected with the wider world. Gold from West Africa traveled north across the Sahara, exchanged for salt, a commodity as valuable as gold itself. Caravans of camels crossed vast deserts guided by stars, and oral maps passed down through generations. These routes did more than move goods, they moved ideas, technologies, and beliefs. Africa's ecological diversity played a crucial role in shaping these societies. The continent contains rainforests dense with life, deserts vast and unforgiving, mountains capped with snow, and savannas stretching beyond the horizon. It is home to more large mammal species than anywhere else on Earth. Elephants shape forests by knocking down trees. Hippos carve waterways. Predators regulate entire ecosystems. This intricate balance evolved over millions of years, making Africa one of the planet's most ecologically complex regions. For humans, living within this environment required deep ecological knowledge. Pastoralist societies followed grazing cycles with their herds. Hunter-gatherer groups like the San people developed tracking skills so precise they could read hours-old movements from a single bent blade of grass. Knowledge was stored not in books, but in stories, songs, and rituals. Living libraries passed orally from one generation to the next. Then came a turning point that would reshape Africa and the world. From the 15th century onward, European exploration intensified along Africa's coasts. At first, trade continued patterns already established: gold, ivory, spices. But gradually, the demand for labor in the Americas transformed these interactions into something far darker. The transatlantic slave trade forcibly removed an estimated 12 million Africans from their homes. Entire communities were fractured. Economies were destabilized. Trauma echoed across generations. It is impossible to understand modern Africa without acknowledging this wound. The slave trade was not simply an external event. It reshaped internal dynamics as well, fueling conflict and altering political structures. Yet even in the face of unimaginable brutality, African cultures endured. Languages survived. Traditions adapted. Spiritual systems transformed and traveled, influencing music, religion, and resistance movements across the Atlantic world. As centuries passed, a new wave of external control followed. European colonial powers carved the continent into territories with borders drawn in distant rooms, often ignoring ethnic, linguistic, and ecological realities. Railways, mines, and ports were built primarily to extract resources: rubber, copper, diamonds, oil, rather than to develop local economies. Colonial administrations imposed new systems of governance, education, and labor, disrupting long-standing social structures. But Africa was never passive. Resistance took many forms. Some leaders fought militarily. Others negotiated, adapted, or preserved autonomy through cultural resilience. Ethiopia famously resisted colonization and remained independent, becoming a symbol of African sovereignty worldwide. Elsewhere, uprisings flared, sometimes crushed, sometimes successful, always leaving their mark. By the mid-20th century, winds of change swept across the continent. One by one, African nations pushed toward independence. The process was rarely smooth. New states inherited borders and institutions designed for exploitation, not self-governance. Cold War politics further complicated these transitions as global powers competed for influence. Yet despite immense challenges, Africa entered a new chapter, one defined by self-determination. Today, Africa is the youngest continent demographically. Its cities are among the fastest growing in the world. Lagos, Nairobi, Accra, Addis Ababa, these are not relics of the past, but engines of innovation. African entrepreneurs lead advances in mobile banking, renewable energy, and digital technology. Artists, filmmakers, and musicians shape global culture, from Afrobeats to fashion runways. At the same time, Africa faces profound challenges. Climate change intensifies droughts and floods. Political instability persists in some regions. Economic inequality remains stark. But these challenges do not define Africa. They exist alongside extraordinary resilience, creativity, and potential. As we move forward in this journey, we will travel deeper into Africa's landscapes, its wildlife, its modern societies, and the delicate balance between tradition and transformation. We will listen to voices too often simplified or ignored, and we will begin to see Africa not as a backdrop to history, but as one of its central architects. Because Africa is not just where humanity began. In many ways, it is where humanity is being reimagined. As the sun rises higher over Africa, the continent reveals itself not just as a place of origins, but as a place of constant motion. Rivers carve new paths, cities swell and reshape themselves. Traditions bend without breaking. To truly understand Africa, we must move beyond its past and into the living present, where ancient rhythms coexist with modern urgency, and where the future is being written in real time. Begin with the land itself, because in Africa, geography is never just background. It is destiny, challenge, and opportunity all at once. The Sahara Desert, often imagined as an endless sea of sand, is in fact a dynamic and complex system. It is the largest hot desert on Earth, roughly the size of the United States, and yet it has not always been dry. Geological evidence shows that the Sahara has cycled between green and arid states multiple times over the last several 100,000 years. Ancient rock art depicts giraffes, crocodiles, and lush grasslands where dunes now dominate. Climate shifts, driven by changes in Earth's orbit, transformed this once-green corridor into a formidable barrier, reshaping migration routes, trade patterns, and cultural exchange across the continent. South of the Sahara lies the Sahel, a fragile transition zone where desert meets savanna. Here, life balances on a knife edge between rainfall and drought. For centuries, communities in the Sahel developed sophisticated ways to survive uncertainty, from mobile pastoralism to water-harvesting agriculture. Today, this region sits at the front line of climate change. Rising temperatures and unpredictable rains threaten livelihoods, fueling migration and conflict, but also innovation. Farmers experiment with regenerative techniques, reviving ancient practices like zai pits and stone bunds to restore degraded land. What looks like adaptation is, in many ways, memory returning. Farther south, the savannas stretch wide, home to the iconic wildlife that has shaped the world's image of Africa. Lions, elephants, zebras, and wildebeest are not symbols created for postcards. They are keystone species in vast ecological networks. The Great Migration, where more than 1 million wildebeest and hundreds of thousands of zebras move in a circular path across Kenya and Tanzania, is the largest terrestrial migration on Earth. It is not guided by instinct alone, but by rainfall patterns, grass chemistry, and survival learned over generations. Yet these ecosystems are under pressure. Expanding human populations, habitat fragmentation, and poaching threaten wildlife survival. Conservation in Africa is no longer just about protecting animals from people. It is about protecting landscapes with people. Community-based conservation programs have shown that when local populations benefit directly from protecting wildlife, biodiversity thrives. In Namibia, Kenya, and parts of southern Africa, wildlife numbers have stabilized or even increased where communities are partners, not obstacles. Move east and the land rises dramatically. The Ethiopian highlands, often called the roof of Africa, are among the most agriculturally important regions on the continent. Isolated by mountains, Ethiopia developed a unique cultural and linguistic identity, with its own calendar, alphabet, and culinary traditions. Coffee, one of the world's most consumed beverages, traces its origins to these highlands. According to legend, a goat herder noticed his animals dancing with energy after eating red berries from a certain shrub. Today, coffee fuels a global industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars, yet millions of smallholder farmers who grow it still struggle with volatile prices and climate vulnerability. Africa's rainforests, particularly the Congo Basin, form the second largest tropical rainforest on Earth after the Amazon. These forests act as massive carbon sinks, regulating global climate and housing unparalleled biodiversity. Forest elephants disperse seeds across vast distances. Okapis, rare and elusive, move quietly beneath the canopy. Indigenous communities have lived in harmony with these forests for millennia, their knowledge critical to conservation efforts. Yet logging, mining, and agricultural expansion threaten to push this ecosystem past a tipping point, with consequences far beyond Africa's borders. The story of Africa today cannot be told without its people. Over 1.4 billion individuals live across 54 countries, speaking more than 2,000 languages. Nigeria alone has over 500 distinct languages. This diversity is not accidental. It reflects millennia of migration, adaptation, and exchange. Language in Africa is not just communication. It is identity, worldview, and history encoded in sound. Urbanization is reshaping that diversity in powerful ways. By 2050, Africa's urban population is expected to double. Cities grow not just outward but upward and inward, absorbing rural migrants seeking opportunity. Lagos is a city of contradictions: extreme wealth and extreme poverty, gridlock and creativity, chaos and coordination. It is also one of the most culturally influential cities on the planet. Nigerian filmmakers produce more movies annually than Hollywood, and Nigerian music dominates global charts. These creative industries are not side stories. They are economic engines and cultural ambassadors. Technology has leapfrogged traditional infrastructure in many African countries. Mobile phones became widespread before landlines ever did. Mobile banking platforms like M-Pesa transformed financial access for millions, allowing people to send money, pay bills, and run businesses with simple devices. In rural areas, farmers receive weather forecasts and market prices via text message, making decisions that were once based on guesswork now informed by data. This is not technological catch-up. It is innovation shaped by necessity. Education plays a central role in this transformation, but access remains uneven. Across the continent, young people represent both a demographic opportunity and a political challenge. Africa has the world's youngest population, with a median age under 20. This youth bulge carries enormous potential for economic growth, creativity, and leadership, but only if jobs, education, and stability keep pace. Where they do not, frustration can turn into unrest or migration. Where they do, the results can be extraordinary. Consider Rwanda, a country that emerged from genocide in the 1990s and rebuilt itself with a focus on governance, healthcare, and gender equality. Or Ghana, which has become a hub for democratic stability and cultural revival. Or Senegal, where a tradition of civic engagement helps anchor political life. These stories do not erase hardship, but they complicate the narrative. Africa is not a single trajectory. It is dozens of them, unfolding simultaneously. Religion and spirituality continue to shape daily life across the continent. Christianity and Islam coexist with traditional belief systems that emphasize ancestors, land, and community. In many places, these systems blend rather than compete. A church service might include drumming rooted in pre-Christian rituals. A mosque might stand beside a sacred tree older than written memory. Spirituality in Africa is often practical, woven into health, justice, and social responsibility. Food offers another lens into continuity and change. African cuisines are deeply regional, shaped by climate, trade, and history. West African stews simmer with tomatoes, peppers, and palm oil, influenced by crops introduced through global exchange. East African dishes reflect Indian Ocean connections, with spices, rice, and flatbreads. In the Horn of Africa, injera bread serves as both plate and utensil, embodying a communal approach to eating that reflects broader social values. But food security remains a pressing issue. Climate shocks, conflict, and economic inequality contribute to hunger, even in regions with agricultural potential. At the same time, African farmers are experimenting with drought-resistant crops, indigenous grains like millet and sorghum, and sustainable practices that could reshape global food systems. What is old is becoming new again. Africa's relationship with the world is also evolving. For centuries, the continent was positioned as a source of raw materials. Today, global interest in Africa is intensifying once more, driven by resources, markets, and geopolitics. China, the United States, Europe, and emerging powers all compete for influence. Infrastructure projects promise development but raise questions about debt, sovereignty, and long-term impact. African leaders and civil societies navigate these pressures with varying degrees of success, striving to assert agency in a global system that has rarely been neutral. Migration is another defining force. Some Africans move within the continent, from rural areas to cities, or across borders in search of work. Others attempt dangerous journeys across deserts and seas toward Europe or beyond. These movements are often portrayed as crises, but they are also deeply human responses to opportunity, insecurity, and hope. The African diaspora, spread across the Americas, Europe, and beyond, maintains strong cultural and economic ties to the continent, influencing politics, investment, and identity on both sides. As we continue this journey, one truth becomes clear. Africa is not waiting to be saved, discovered, or explained. It is negotiating its own future in real time, drawing on ancient knowledge and modern tools, shaped by forces both internal and external. The continent's challenges are real and significant, but so is its momentum. In the final part of this story, we will step back and look forward. We will explore Africa's role in the global future as a climate stabilizer, a cultural powerhouse, and a demographic engine. We will ask what Africa's story tells us about humanity itself, and why the fate of this continent is inseparable from the fate of the world. Because Africa is not on the margins of the human story. It is at its center, still unfolding. As our journey across Africa approaches its horizon, the continent reveals something deeper than landscapes, cities, or statistics. It reveals a mirror. To look at Africa closely is to see humanity itself, at its most ancient, its most resilient, and its most unfinished. This is not a story that ends neatly. It is a story that opens outward, asking what kind of future we are willing to build together. Africa's role in the global climate story is impossible to ignore. The continent contributes the least to historical greenhouse gas emissions, yet it is among the most vulnerable to climate change. Rising sea levels threaten coastal cities like Alexandria, Lagos, and Dakar. Glaciers on Mount Kilimanjaro and the Ruwenzori Mountains are disappearing, silent witnesses to a warming world. Prolonged droughts strain agriculture in the Horn of Africa, while intensified floods displace communities in central and southern regions. And yet, Africa is also a critical part of the solution. Its forests, wetlands, and grasslands absorb vast amounts of carbon. The Congo Basin alone plays a stabilizing role for global rainfall patterns. Renewable energy potential across the continent is immense. Africa holds some of the world's richest solar resources, powerful wind corridors, and untapped geothermal energy. In places like Morocco, massive solar complexes already feed national grids. In Kenya, geothermal plants harness the heat of the Great Rift Valley itself, turning ancient geological forces into modern power. These transitions are not just technical, they are social. In many African communities, energy access is transformative. A single solar panel can mean light for evening study, refrigeration for medicine, connectivity for commerce. Development here is not about excess, it is about dignity. The choices Africa makes as it industrializes may shape whether the global transition to clean energy succeeds or fails. Culture, too, is shaping Africa's global presence in unprecedented ways. African music, fashion, film, and literature are no longer niche or emerging. They are central. Afrobeats fill stadiums from New York to Tokyo. African designers redefine global aesthetics. Writers from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie to Mohamed Mbougar Sarr challenge the world to see Africa not through pity or nostalgia, but through complexity and confidence. These voices do not ask for permission. They assume space. This cultural renaissance is deeply connected to identity. For generations, Africa was spoken about more than it was listened to. Narratives were imposed, simplified, or distorted. Today, Africans increasingly tell their own stories online, on screen, and on the ground. Social media collapses distance. A protest in Khartoum, a startup launch in Nairobi, a fashion show in Accra can be witnessed instantly around the world. Representation no longer waits for gatekeepers. At the same time, governance remains one of the continent's greatest tests. Democratic progress is uneven. Some nations strengthen institutions, protect press freedom, and manage peaceful transitions of power. Others struggle with corruption, authoritarianism, or recurring conflict. These realities coexist, often within the same region. The temptation to generalize is strong but misleading. Africa's political future will not be decided by a single model, but by millions of local choices, reforms, and acts of courage. Women play a central role in this future. Across Africa, women are farmers, entrepreneurs, educators, and political leaders. In some countries, women hold a higher percentage of parliamentary seats than in many Western nations. Still, gender inequality persists, shaped by tradition, economics, and access to education. Where women gain opportunity, entire communities benefit. The evidence is overwhelming, and the momentum is growing. Health is another frontier of transformation. Africa has faced devastating epidemics, from HIV/AIDS to Ebola to COVID-19. Each crisis exposed weaknesses, but also resilience. Community-based healthcare networks, rapid response epidemiology, and public trust initiatives have improved dramatically. African scientists and doctors are increasingly leading research, not just implementing it. Lessons learned here influence global health strategies, reminding the world that innovation often emerges under pressure. Perhaps the most powerful force shaping Africa's future is its youth. This generation is more connected, more educated, and more globally aware than any before it. They navigate multiple identities with ease, local and global, traditional and digital. They question authority, demand accountability, and imagine futures their grandparents could scarcely envision. Their energy is not abstract. It fills classrooms, startups, protest movements, and creative studios. But youth alone is not enough. The coming decades will test whether opportunity can expand faster than expectation. Jobs, infrastructure, and governance must keep pace with aspiration. The stakes are enormous, not just for Africa but for the world. By the end of this century, 1 in 4 people on Earth may be African. Global economics, culture, and politics will be shaped accordingly, whether prepared or not. To speak of Africa, then, is not to speak of elsewhere. It is to speak of the future center of gravity of humanity. And yet, beneath all these trajectories, climate, culture, politics, population, something older persists. A worldview shaped by interdependence. In many African philosophies, the individual is inseparable from the community. Concepts like Ubuntu express a simple but profound idea: I am because we are. In a fractured global era, this perspective feels less like tradition and more like instruction. As our journey comes full circle, we return to where we began: the land at dawn. The plains, the forests, the cities waking to life. Africa does not ask to be romanticized, nor reduced to struggle. It asks to be understood in full, as origin and innovation, as memory and momentum, as a place that has carried humanity before and may yet carry it forward again. Africa is not a chapter that has ended. It is a story still being told by billions of voices, across countless paths, under the same wide sky where humanity first learned to walk. And in listening to that story, we may better understand our own.